Hello, welcome to this latest episode of Smart Coffee Break, the productivity podcast brought to you by Nestlé Coffee Partners. In this podcast series, we're looking at how we work, what makes us productive, and how we're going to concentrate, collaborate, and communicate in the future. I'm Jeremy Myerson. I'm a writer, academic, and director of WorkTech Academy, and I'll be your guide to the new world of work as organizations plan their return to the office. Today, I want to talk about getting into flow and focus at work. Why are we able to concentrate on some days, but get easily distracted on others? What happens to our brains when we try to focus? And how can we develop habits to help us think creatively? To help me explore the mysteries of the human mind is my special guest, Dr. Fiona Kerr, a neuroscientist based in Adelaide who runs the Neurotech Institute. Fiona, welcome.
Thank you. Lovely to be with you, Jeremy.
The first thing I want to ask is how can people get into flow and focus at work? And how does this support productivity? We all know that some days we're in flow and other days we just can't get there.
Okay, so the flow, the creative ideation, there's this wonderful state that you get into. And you can actually cue it. And some people can get better and better at getting down into there faster. And you can use things to do that. Certain music, certain views, even certain chairs. You know, some people are really good at being able to get there fast. But there's a couple of things that have to happen. So you might think that you can get into kind of this lovely creative thing by having a really open book about what to create about. And that never works. You actually need boundaries. So you need a clear challenge or, some idea of what you actually want to achieve. And then you have to have some level of skill, because what the brain does is it chunks up information and knowledge and expertise over time. And you've got these beautiful kind of 3D spider webs of mastery basically sitting in your brain. And when you're in that creative kind of focused flow, then what happens is, because you're paying attention to something, then they kind of open up and you just can increase them and connect them more. So you need that ability to focus, to pay attention. And you also need a level of kind of control over what you're doing so that you don't get distracted. That's really important. And it's very proactive. So other people can't make you go into flow. You have to want to dive into there and grapple with something really interesting. So get that challenge and really kind of, work it. Productivity, what comes out of that is actually different alone and together. So when you're alone, what you get out of that are a number of things. When you're paying attention and when you're really liking it, I don't know if you've ever had that feeling where you could kind of open your head and just pour facts in if you find something really fascinating. And what that is doing is, when you're really focusing on something, you're actually synchronizing your neuronal firing. You've got all of these neurons that are normally connected with picking up information, and they start to synchronize, which means they go faster. You've got more of those chemicals, those nice chemicals of dopamine and all those positive things that are making you feel good. And you get to the stage where you notice more and you can get predictive. You can actually do something called preemptive thinking. So you get so fast that you're starting to look for relevant information and pull it in, and you get that. It's called expectation resonance. It's beautiful. It's the reason why if you just bought a red car, you see red cars everywhere, because suddenly you're cued to pick that up. So if you're in a group, then you've got the added bonus of all the neurochemical interaction kind of activities. So you've got chemicals from being in the same proximity. We share about 2,000 chemicals. You've got all the oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin of looking at each other, sharing space. Voice, that's 3 to 8 hertz in your brain. That's stimulating all sorts of things. So you've got this absolute cocktail of electrochemical activity, and that increases, trust and affiliation. So you've got to be in a high trust environment to maintain that kind of focus and flow. If you're worried people are going to dive on you, it just stops it. And then you get really nimble thinking, you get faster, and your patience for the kind of disruption or difficulty is much greater as well. So you get a number of really sort of advantageous aspects to collaborating. Shared values increase, so productivity rises quite steeply.
The famous psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote a book about flow, and he was analysing the relationship between the scale of the challenge and our ability or resources to meet that challenge. Is that equation still relevant today?
He talks about needing to have some control and being able to concentrate. He talks about that kind of, energetic challenge, that mindful challenge. He talks about goal-directed behaviour and again, paying attention. And he also talks about some of the outcomes that we discussed. So once you're in that zone, you don't fear failure because you're so caught up in what you're doing that it doesn't matter. It's just really fascinating. So lots of those things around the challenge of the skill, having less distraction, and that's because of what your brain does when you're in flow. It's very similar. The only thing I would probably not agree with, and maybe it's semantics, is he talks about psychic entropy. He talks about when you're not demanding, when you kind of kick back and you're daydreaming, then it's sort of not useful or enjoyable. And actually, that's your default mode. And that's when your brain can connect things that it can't connect if you're in task. Because when you're in task, you push your brain into certain little rabbit holes. And the way that our brain collects and stores information is very sort of distractive. It's all over your brain. And so when you do look out the window or go for that walk, that's a key part of flow, because it allows your brain to then go, oh, okay, now I can go all over the place and pick the bits that I want and put it together and give you this idea and serve it to you.
In terms of companies thinking about bringing their workforce back to the office, clearly the pandemic has had an effect on our ability to concentrate. What should organizations be thinking about in terms of office design, for example?
Right, because now what I hear is, oh, it's great, people can do work at home, and then we know now that we need to be together to be all sort of creative and innovative, so now we'll just have couches. No, it's not that easy. But there's a few things. One of the things to think about that's a lovely, every manager should kind of put it by their screen is attention is a resource. So think about that in terms of how do you maintain the capability for people to kind of pay attention to what they need to. So some of the things to think about have been true before the pandemic. It was as we were technologizing, it became more important. So you define, when you have people back in, it's a case of defining and agreeing on a number of things. So what does productivity look like? What does deep and shallow work look like? Because deep work is that stuff that you should turn off, not be available, go offline. You might want to sort of walk or even nap. And it's that stuff about really having to go down, which is why we don't multitask, because the brain then can spread out all the information that it needs like over a great big table and connect and kind of do new things. So agree on that and agree on how and when, and also agree on how people are going to collaborate, when they need to come together. Have some informal spaces to collaborate as well as formal spaces. Because if you go into a formal collaboration meeting, you actually go in with a very different cognitive headspace. You're there to do a task and to look right and to make good connections. And whereas if you're informally doing it, which is why every really innovative company in the world I've ever been in has things like a shared eating space. What are the places that people can share ideas? And they need to be some small little private ones and some big ones. And then understanding connectivity. So when do you need to be face-to-face? And when does the group need to be face-to-face? And another thing to really make sure is that you have comfort and agreement around how you use technology. So I'm a systems engineer. I love tech. I work with all sorts of technologies. But what does good look like? Because what we stray into, and I see it all the time working with organisations, is that kind of stress of surveillance, and it's because of how technology picks up data. That's the way that it's shaped. That's the way it works, and the value and worth of roles is very difficult to digitise. So how will tech help? When do you need the tech? What does it need to do? And that means that people can feel in control of that, and they don't feel, they don't feel surveilled by it, because that wipes out, that creates stress, just like COVID has, and stress wipes out the capacity for flow, because there's all sorts of things stress does to our brain and our body. And a couple of other things, I guess, exposure to complex problem solving. So get people really involved, and also the leaders increase the capability for creative flow. So a respectful and empathic, positive leader that shows high trust, gives agency, allows decision making, gives resources and those sorts of things. They create a lovely term called extrapolative intuiting, and all that means is it allows people to be really intuitive about what they think. And intuition is actually taking your expertise and bundling it up in a concept. So it brings that wisdom to the fore, and it's a really good thing to do.
In terms of the brain, you've talked about why daydreaming is often quite useful and allowing the brain to recharge and take a break. What about taking a break in the physical office? How can we do that without losing focus?
Not only do you not lose focus when you sort of get up and take a break, you actually increase focus. So I guess the basic thing to think about there is again, because of the way that we store information. So a quick little example, even if you look at text, what's fascinating is the straight lines go in one place, curves go in another, the colour goes in another, text goes in another, the meaning of the word goes in another, the gist of the word goes in another. So even a word, that's how much it's cascaded around the brain. So when you get up and move around, you are then allowing all sorts of other things to turn on. In fact, if you go for a walk, then the exercise turns on oxytocin. It increases hippocampal activation, which is, memory, learning, new ideas. So what it does is it allows your brain to kind of engage all those multiple pieces or areas and come up with multiple scenarios and also to settle what you've just read or learned and to do those connections and create those new ideas. So if you just keep ploughing through, you don't go into flow. But if you actually allow it, if you kick back, either have a nap or have a chat, that's that stuff about, it's never when you're deep down concentrating, it's always when you're doing something else. The point about the water cooler, the coffee point, the stairs instead of the lift, is they are those places that create serendipitous connection. And what that does for your brain is it puts you into proximity with other people. And so there's all sorts of electrochemical changes that happen. And it's also that kind of really lovely multimodal way that people are dealing with each other. And all of those things that don't occur over screens, all the micro behaviors, all the feelings of inclusion, and again, the chemicals that are created, they all happen at that kind of informal meeting place. And that creates this beautiful recipe for sort of high trust, high collaboration, and high creativity.
Tell me, Fiona, what are you looking at in the Neurotech Institute right now? What are the challenges that you're talking to companies about?
So we're looking at the sort of things that people are asking about a lot are things like the hybrid mix. So hybrid workplaces are the hardest of the lot. They're harder than virtual, they're harder than face-to-face. And they can be the worst of both worlds or the best of both worlds. So we work with organisations sort of very much bespoke to say, right, this is your situation, whether it's 3,000 people or 30, and what are the ways that you mix and match what people do at home, how you can make it as inclusive for people that aren't here as they are, and that's very difficult. So that is one aspect. We've got a really interesting project going at the moment, whether or not you make better complex decisions with another human being with you. We kind of know that we do, but we're testing it. So just proximity and then a collaborative, trusted human, whether you then make a better decision over, with information over a screen. So that's the thing we're doing. And we're also looking at how often a leader has to be face to face with their team to maintain trust.
Do you think companies are going to put more emphasis back on concentration in the future and have the pendulum swing away a little from teamwork and collaboration?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's very much, the thing I really want companies to think about is that they choose how this happens.
Well, Fiona Kerr, it's been fascinating talking to you and learning about how the brain works and how chemicals are intermingling, the spider webs of connection. And it's quite clear to me that the ability to get into flow and to focus for the future will be as important as the imperative to collaborate.
For more information on how coffee can help productivity in your workplace, contact Nestlé Coffee Partners or visit our Smart Coffee Hub on the link provided to download the playbook.